WNYC Studios is supported by Wise. Wise, the smart way to manage the currencies you need around the world. With the Wise account, you can send, spend, and receive in up to 40 currencies with only a few simple taps. Be smart. Get Wise. Download the Wise app today. Terms and conditions apply.
It's the Brian Lehrer Show on WNYC. Good Monday morning, everyone. Good June 1st morning again, everyone. And today starts Pride Month, where we celebrate the LGBTQ plus community, and with diversity in general and the trans community specifically facing such rollbacks in protection. Many are probably drawing on the inspiration of the early heroes from Stonewall, people like that, and the first Pride marches in 1970 or so. That impulse to look past heroes, or look to past heroes, for guidance and support in tough times is very much in keeping with the idea behind my next guest's book. Writer Antonio Pagliarulo's new book is Queer Saints, a radical guide to magic, miracles, and modern intercession. You might have heard him on the show before, making the case for Father Michael Judge to be named a saint. His concept of sainthood is not quite the same as the Catholic Church is. I don't think the Church is about to canonize Saint Freddie Mercury, but let's have him explain. Antonio Pagliarulo, thanks for coming on again. Welcome back to WNYC.
Thank you, Brian, for having me. It's a pleasure.
So, as we've discussed before, your introduction to the idea of saints was through Catholicism, where there are certain specific steps that have to be followed before someone can be considered a saint. And you do include some recognized Catholic saints in the book, but your conception is much broader. So, in general, in your framework, what makes someone a saint?
Well, what makes someone a saint is you have saints are generally thought, as you said, to be canonized by the church. But what makes somebody a saint is they are people who have passed over, but they have done extraordinary things in this life. They have done very memorable things, revolutionary things, and they are people we call to for help, for intercession. But they are mainly marked by what they did in this life, and not by what an institution, gave them the title for.
And so the word magic is part of the subtitle of your book, as well as miracles. Do you distinguish between the two, or do you think both those things are real in the concrete world?
I do think they are real in the concrete world, and I do distinguish between the two. I mean, I think magic is what we do when we want to really bring, our abilities together to change consciousness at will, and miracles are what we see when we do that work and when we put our force and our will into our spirituality, and what we often get is a miracle. That's the result.
How do you call on saints in your own life? Tell us about the word intercession in your title. To me, intercession was my favorite part of the school year when I was in college. So how do you mean intercession? When
I was educated and raised, intercession was a lot about calling on saints through a lot of begging and through a lot of supplication. You kind of had to get down on your knees and state your purpose and make yourself believe that you were worthy and make them believe that you were worthy. But my definition of modern intercession says, you go to the altar and you will be altered because you are already worthy. There is no begging. You go and you ask for intercession because you are already worthy of that intercession, and you're worthy of the magic that it requires and the miracle that will come from it. So there's a lot of self-worth and knowledge of our own power. And that's what brings us to intercession. We don't go in modern intercession, I should say, we don't go about begging. And that's the old model. The new model takes us to a place where we look at ourselves first and we say, yes, I do need this assistance, or I do want this assistance, and I'm worthy of it. And that's where we start from.
Can you go a little further on that even? Like, who intercedes with whom?
Yes, of course. Well, when I talk about saint magic, there are specific practices that we can do. There's petitioning. There's the practice of writing a petition. There's the practice of lighting a candle, which is considered candle magic, which is done really, we call it candle magic, but it's done in so many places. But you begin by choosing a saint that you want to work with. And then you just begin by literally, the steps are simple. You quiet your mind, you quiet yourself, but you can do this anywhere. You don't have to be in a church, in a cathedral, in a sacred space. You can do this at your kitchen table. Your altar can be your windowsill, can be your desk, can be your kitchen table. That's what makes this something that's so accessible, and why so many people, I think, are coming back to saints. Because don't forget, saints were human, and that's what makes them, so relational in terms of people saying, I can relate to that saint, because whatever we've gone through, the saints have gone through. But when we intercede, when we ask for intercession, we go before a saint, and we don't say, I need this help because I've done bad things, or I'm kind of not worthy and I need some sort of forgiveness first. That's not what it's about. It's about simply recognizing that we need assistance, and we're looking for leaders and examples to help us understand the world as we see it in this state right now, which is, quite frightening in many ways. So when we ask for intercession, we're asking to understand the world through clearer eyes. We're asking for strength, and for more spiritual guidance.
Listeners, if you're just joining us, my guest is Antonio Pagliarulo, whose new book is Queer Saints, A Radical Guide to Magic, Miracles, and Modern Intercession, just in time for Pride Month. And maybe you've already adopted, listeners, an unofficial saint who you look to for inspiration and guidance. Have you? Name that person, 212-433-WNYC. And especially for today, for those celebrating Pride Month, are you looking back at anyone who fought for LGBTQ plus rights as you're looking, to today's challenges, as Antonio was just describing, as if you need to be reminded? Who might be a queer saint, to use his term, for you? 212-433-WNYC, 212-433-9692. You can call, or you can text, or besides naming a saint, you can ask a question. Antonio, as I mentioned, the book includes a few actual Catholic saints who you feel embraced what today could be called queer identities, even in the 12th century, for example, as in the case of St. Francis of Assisi. Tell us about him in this context.
So growing up, there was never a time where I didn't know about St. Francis of Assisi. But as I got older, he has long been a figure, sort of a queer saint, and certainly in the LGBTQ community, because queer, this goes back to the question of what do we mean when we say queer here. It is not only about identity. To be queer is to do something that is revolutionary, that is radical, something that really changes the perception and goes against the established norms and convention. And that's what St. Francis did. When he was the son of, wealthy parents. When he went in the town square and stripped himself, of all of his clothes, that was a very transformational act. And he said, I'm going to dedicate myself to the poor and to lepers and to helping people. He wasn't supposed to do that. That was very revolutionary. And that not only, of course, transformed him and the people he worked with, but it transformed the world. I mean, his order has been strong for hundreds of years. So he went ahead, including, and it goes right up to, modern, someone in my book who's considered a modern saint, who's Father Michael Judge. But St. Francis did these radical acts. And for that reason, he's very much looked at as queer. He railed against established ideas and norms and said, I'm going to love everybody. I'm going to serve everybody. That's the message. There is no sense of hate. And, when I was a kid, my nuns used to tell the story, and I don't know if this particular story is true, but they used to tell the story about his love for animals and the environment was so great that when in his hair, he sort of grew his hair in a certain way so that there was enough room for, animals and bugs and vermin to sort of reside, because he just wanted them to have a home. So his sense of love and his sense of wanting community and to build that community was very radical and very brave. And in the book, I say that queer is the identity of the brave.
To show the range of the, quote, queer saints in your book, I see that you include Saint Judy Garland. Tell us why in her case.
I do include St. Judy Garland because, well, she's long been an icon of the queer community, and there are, well, she's for not only a queer ally, but she's a singer. She's known for being very much of an icon. When she died on June 22nd, there's often a correlation that is made between that time frame from when she died and the Stonewall riots. And but that's often seen as an urban legend, but you can see the connection because it goes from Judy's death into the Stonewall riots. But she's long been a queer icon, and she still remains that.
Charles in Harlem has one, I think. Oh, is he ready? Can I go to Charles? On line one. There we go. Charles in Harlem, you're on WNYC. Hello.
Oh, my God, so fast. I'm from Harlem. I was actually raised in Philadelphia by a good Baptist grandmother, so she would not be she would, we were baptized the right way, none of the sprinkles on the head or anything, and she was very much opposed to these saint-like things of the Catholic Church. But having said that, if I had to think about this in a sort of, heterodox Christian way, I'd have to say James Baldwin. James Baldwin well, he's passed away, but he sort of represents a saint-like figure in that Christian mystical tradition. I mean, he was very much about love and how love is radical and how sometimes you have to put your body on the line when it comes to living a life where you actually loved people. And he was also a preacher. So I think he fits that mold of being a saint, if I had to put a word to it.
Sure enough. And Charles, thank you for your call. James Baldwin is in your book, right, Antonio?
Indeed, he is. St. James Baldwin is in my book, and he was everything that we've just heard. He's someone who really did talk about and write about love and the power of love in terms of, and his youth, defined by the Harlem Renaissance. He was an extraordinary figure. And you can see that through his writing today. It's just, timeless, and it's so meaningful to a queer readership.
My saint, a listener writes, is Saint Laurent, the genius fashion designer. Somebody else writes, intercession is asking a saint to go to Jesus to help you. A common interceder is the Blessed Mother to get her son to help out. Sound right to you?
This sounds correct. And I'm going to actually say that the interesting thing is that many people may not know that the practice of intercession, is not only about, lives in Christianity. It's a practice that is centuries old. It exists beyond the Catholic context. We see it in Judaism. We see it in many, many faiths. Now, interestingly, when we talk about the Blessed Mother, the Virgin Mary, there is, right in the beginning of my book, I talk about La Madonna di Montevergine, and there's a wonderful story. She's known as the Madonna of the queer people and the queer population and of the marginalized, because as the story goes, there was a shrine to her in Montevergine in Italy, and one day a gay couple was walking by, and they were hand in hand. They were in love, and the townspeople did not like that, and they beat the couple and they tied them up and left them for dead overnight, where it was believed they would be, sort of ravaged by animals. And in the middle of the night, in the midst of their plight, one of the two screamed out called out to the Virgin Mary and said, "Please save us. You must love us too." And in fact, as the legend goes, a beam of light sort of shot down and freed them of their chains. And when they came back down this mountain and went into the town the next day, the townspeople saw that they had no wounds and they were clothed again. And they said, "How can this be? We beat you. We left you for dead." And they told the story of a woman who came in the night and, blessed them and freed them. And they said that was the Madonna. And so the townspeople said, well, that must mean that she loves you too. And so thus became the tradition of the Madonna of Montevergine, and it goes on today. On February 2nd, which is the Feast of Candlemas, it's called La Candelora in Italy, and by the busload, people go up the mountain and up into the town of Montevergine to give thanks and to ask for her intercession. And many queer people go up and give their, thanks and their gratitude and their love for all of that. So it happens
Michael
even
in
today.
Manhattan has a potential saint for the book or for the informal list that follows the book. Michael, you're on WNYC. Hello.
Thank you very much. I wanted to add to the list of someone who I think really has not been acknowledged. His name was Tom Stoddard, and he was at the New York Civil Liberties Union in the 1980s and 1990s. Unfortunately, he died in the late 90s. At the time, I'm not gay. I worked at the American Civil Liberties Union, and I used to call on Tom for help on matters having nothing to do with gay rights. He was a wonderful, intelligent, kind, incredible lawyer. And one time, I'll never forget, he wrote an op-ed in the New York Times about the issue of same-sex marriage at a time when no one was ever talking about it. And he made the point something I had never thought about before. And he made the point so powerfully and eloquently. And I think he really got through to people like myself. And then years later, same-sex marriage was recognized, and his name had been almost forgotten. And I think of him as a real saint in the truest sense. I miss him very much, and his contributions were enormous.
It's a wonderful tribute to Tom Stoddard. Antonio?
Yes, absolutely. And in fact, I think his work is what has made, a lot of Lambda Legal has certainly honored him, but his work, someone else, very revolutionary and very much a visionary in terms of rights for queer people. So absolutely, as we expand the list, St. Tom does go on there, absolutely.
We're going to run out of time soon. I'm just going to go through some other names. One from a text. Listener put in multiple ones. St. Hansberry, St. Fornus, St. Sontag. There are so many gay/dyke women writers I have on my wall, the person writes, who I call to for inspiration when I ache for a place to have belonged in history. Nicely put. I see that in your book, you mention artists like Oscar Wilde and Keith Haring, in addition to Baldwin, who he mentioned, activists like Marsha B. Johnson in New York, Harvey Milk in San Francisco, icons like Marlene Dietrich and Judy Garland, who came up earlier, also Princess Diana. And there are lesser-known saints in the book, like Mae Morris or Magnus Hirschfeld. You want to pick one of those as we get ready to go out the door here?
Yes, of course. So St. Magnus Hirschfeld was a sexologist. He was a German Jew who was not only, beaten down for his work with Jewish people, but for his work with the queer community, the LGBTQ community. But his work really shows the embrace. He embraced the queer community. He focused on health and well-being, fitted to the times that he was in. And he absolutely, he advanced his research, including the opening of the Institute for Sexual Research in Berlin. He co-wrote and acted in films that portrayed, gay men in a more a sympathetic light. So, and in its heyday, the Institute, was home to a lot of scientific research, artistic pursuits, education, advocacy, and it provided a very safe space for gay men, for lesbians, and of course, Magnus himself was gay. So he offered a lot of hope to queer people, but he offered a lot of care, not only physically and medically, but literally in terms of or spiritually in terms of their hearts and their minds, and needing comfort in a very spiritual sense. So he's someone that many people are not familiar with, and that's why I was so pleased to have him in the book.
Hey, what do you hope will come of this book, or that this book will do, besides kind of like we've been doing, listing a lot of names and people saying, yeah, go, that person, and or you're my saint, I've looked to you for inspiration. What's the goal of this book as you see it?
The goal, it's a couple of goals. I think the goals will, during this month, as we start off Pride, I think it'll remind people that Pride itself, there's a spiritual aspect to Pride, and that the book will also give people a sense of hope, especially queer people, when we're looking for examples, looking for ways to practice spirituality that is a bit broader than perhaps a named, or institutionalized religion, and will remind them of what I say in the book, that you go to the altar and you're altered. And your altar can be anywhere. It's also within you. So I hope it gives people a reminder about the contributions that queer ancestors have made, not only during Pride Month, but in everyday life. There are saints here that have impacted every aspect of our lives today, whether you're queer or not. So I want the book to be seen by certainly queer readers, but by all readers and all people, because it shows, that queer is the identity of the brave, and that courage and that sense of bravery is here to stay, and it will continue.
Antonio Pagliarulo's new book is Queer Saints, A Radical Guide to Magic, Miracles, and Modern Intercession. Thanks so much for sharing it with us. We really appreciate it, Antonio. Happy Pride Month.
Thank you.